Good morning, and welcome to St. Paul United Church of Christ, Keokuk.
All you have to do is ask. All you have to do is ask. Jesus paid the price so that you could be saved. All you have to do is ask. Just gaze up to heaven with the wonder of a child. All you have to do is ask. Does he won't say no or turn you away? All you have to do is ask. God's love and grace are waiting just for you. All you have to do is ask. All you have to do is ask. Would the children come forward for the children's sermon? Okay, have a seat. What's the holiday that we have coming up?
Halloween.
Oh, yes.
Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas.
Yes, Well, maybe the congregation can help us with which one is really close now. Labor Day. Yeah, in 1894, established as a federal holiday for all of the people who go to work, all of the people who labor, all the people who do all the things that need to be done in order for things to work well and for us to have what we need, food, all that sort of thing. As a matter of fact, Addie had offered today to have Sally preach so that I could go to the grape festival. Yes, but if we're to have a worship service today, I'm sure Sally appreciated it that I was going to go ahead and do the sermon rather than her having to think something up right away. Yeah. So a lot of things happen because of the people who labor for us, of the people who do things for us, and we can be very thankful for them. One of the things we do is offer thanks to God for the blessings that we are given, and surely the people who work for us and the work that we have, all of those things are a blessing because we can do something, we have something that we can contribute, right? If we work, and then we have other people who do things for us, mines, stores, all sorts of things like that, and that's a good thing. So let's pray together, and let's pray in thankfulness for those who work and for work itself. Pray, Lord.
Lord,
Thank you for everyone who works and for work and how it helps us to stay occupied and out of trouble. Amen. Yes, one of the things that work does is to occupy us so that we, not that we'd get into trouble for not working, but, there's a possibility, when we're thinking around and have a lot of time on our hands. Work helps us to do constructive things, and God gives it to us as a blessing. Okay, you can go back to your seats. That's right. Thank you very much for hitting the cymbals. You are well trained in relation to that. Thank you very much. Labor Day is a wonderful day, and it's a time in which we really are thankful for all of the work that people do. And while it would have been nice to go to the grape festival, and Addie told me that she had packed my favorite chocolate chip cookies and string cheese for the purpose. I enjoy my work as your minister, and there are many things that I enjoy here. I suppose I could go to the festival later. Some time ago, Howie informed me that he was putting the band back together, and immediately what came to mind was the Blues Brothers. And I guess that some years ago he had been part of a band and they were all going to get together, and I had the opportunity to listen to them play. And one of the things that they played was a familiar hymn. And the leader of the band said he was going to play in the key of salvation. Well, I let Howie know that that would be a sermon title later, because I think that's kind of a wonderful thing. We are familiar with being in a certain key when we sing, and if things are off key, then it doesn't sound quite right. And I see that Leah is shaking her head. That things don't sound quite right when things are off key. It's meant to be on key. In fact, I have heard in one church a choir member who sang with robust love and was always off key. But we can see that it causes some kind of displeasure, sometimes offensive to people, and that sort of thing when things are off key. And when people play things in the right key, it's pleasing to the ear. Things are as they should be. And when that happens, then we feel good. But our lives can also be off key. There are things that can cause that. Life circumstances can change, and we can find ourselves quite off key. We can be filled with fear and worry, and we don't really feel like we're ourselves, and we're a little off key. Or we could just have a bad day, and sometimes we're a little bit off key. We don't have that. We're not right in terms of what we're doing when we're living, and we can tell that we're having what we call an off day. And why not just call it off key? Because that's the way it seems to us. Everything seems to go wrong. We missed the turn to Keokuk, for example. And I had been expecting an exit, and what I found was a little bitty sign that said 218. And then a little bitty sign that said Keokuk, and then it passed me. And I found myself in Missouri, of all places, with a place that had a big sign for the sale of fireworks. Still. So sometimes we're just not right. We're off key. And that certainly seemed to be the case that day, as there were many other instances, Kim will note, in which I seemed to be a little bit off key in my driving. Yes. And I informed her that possibly, I came up with the idea, possibly I'm attention deficit disorder or something. That didn't help, because then she felt more insecure. Sometimes we have a bad day. We're not our old self. There was a family member, there was a person at work once that was called out by two detectives in the place where I worked. The two detectives had come because his son had died. His son had taken his own life. And he was not really his old self for a very long time. And then after that, if people mentioned his son, it would seem like he were going somewhere else. He wasn't singing on the key with the rest of us for a long time. And after a while, that dissipated and passed. But nevertheless, tragedy can put us in that kind of situation too, in which we are off and we don't exactly know how we're going to be our old selves again. We don't know how we're going to get back. And one of the things that helps a great deal is that God can bring us back. God can bring us back. What to do when life touches us in a way that throws us off key? How do we find ourselves again? Where do we go to give ourselves a little bit of time so that we can find our way back to the right key? Those are times when we need to walk closely with God, and God can make us victorious over the things that alienate us from our own selves when we're not really playing in the right key in our life, and we seem to be off somehow. Well, we may ask, can God bring someone's son back? The son who had died, my friend's son, the co-worker who had died? I suppose God could. But more often, God will help us to understand that life extends beyond this life. God will help us to understand that we can have the victory through Jesus Christ, ultimately, no matter what the circumstances of life. And as we're called back to that, we say to ourselves, yes, I know what the key is in which I'm supposed to live my life. It has to do with God. It has to do with Jesus Christ. If I'm going to find myself back again, then I have to move in that direction. I have to have a very close walk with God. We need to walk closely with our God when we're off key, when we have an off day. If we walk closely with God in prayer, if we walk closely with God, we have time to recover, and we have time to receive God's tender, loving care. God teaches us during such times. God teaches us that we can overcome everything. We can do all things through God who strengthens us, even in those times when things seem insurmountable. Those are the times that we need to walk the closest with God. When we can't find our old selves again, when we cannot sing our lives in the right key, when we cannot live our lives in the right key, that's the time to walk the closest with God. Sometimes, however, we act like a person who is lost in the woods. We run and we run and we run and desperately, but we don't find our way back. Those are the times when we need to walk closest with God. Walk with God. Because God is the one who's going to guide us back. I remember in the North Woods, one of the biggest problems when I was living up there, if you got lost, was that you would panic and you would run in whatever direction until you were exhausted. And maybe hypothermia would set in. Now, when we lose the key in our lives, when we're not our old selves, then we have to return back to Jesus Christ, and we have to take a closer walk with God, and God will explain to us how to find our old selves back, how to find the way back. Because all of us, at one time or other in our life, most often experience something that's going to throw us off key. But when that occurs, that's the time to walk closely with God. In prayer, in studying the Bible, in being in worship, all of those things. And it's interesting that our tendency seems to be just the opposite. Our tendency seems to be that we isolate. Our tendency seems to be that we go into depression and isolate, rather than looking upon the strength that we might have in God and relying upon that strength. God teaches us during those times how to defeat those things that are going to, in our minds, overwhelm us. God teaches us how to defeat them if we walk closely with God and claim the victory that we have in God. You see, God created us. God created the whole world. God is going to be victorious in bringing a new creation through Jesus Christ. When we walk with God, we walk with a winner. We walk with someone who, because God has the power to create the whole world, can bring to us the victory through that power. When we walk closely with God, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay because nothing can stop the new creation which God is bringing. We look at the circumstances around us and we say, well, this is a terrible tragedy. This is a disappointment for me. This is the kind of thing that, try as I might, I can't seem to do things right. And God is saying, walk with me because I'm walking in the direction of victory. I can give you victory over all things as long as you walk closely with me. But sometimes we look at all of those circumstances and we think to ourselves, how are we possibly going to get through this? The way we get through this is by walking closely with God. A friend of mine had an experience some years ago in which she experienced that close walk with God. She had decided that she was going to burn some brush in the backyard. And it's hard to light that sort of thing, especially if there's a little bit of moisture involved. So she did something that you're not supposed to do and splashed gasoline over the whole thing. I see that some of you are familiar with that technique. All right, she splashed gasoline over the whole thing, and it was a hot, humid day. What happens to gasoline on a hot, humid day? It starts to vaporize. She got called into the house for a phone call, and this vaporized gas, because it was a hot, humid day, just laid there, waiting for her. Okay, she was on the phone for some period of time. Then she comes out and she lights a match and tosses it in there. And normally there's a kind of a whoosh when the gas catches fire. This was more like an explosion. And she had some flash burns, which weren't incredibly deep, and she was knocked to the ground. And all of a sudden, she felt as though in her mind there was a voice speaking to her, I know what you need. You see, this was somebody who had walked closely with God before and now was walking closely with God. And it's like the support just kicked in when she needed it. I know what you need. Now, she healed quite nicely from all of that. And it's just one incident. But surely it indicates how if we walk closely with God in good times and especially in bad times, things can really turn out rather well in terms of the support that we need. God will help us through those things, give us victory over them. Just look at the strength of will some people have. Look at Stephen Hawking, for example. He had a debilitating disease. A disease in which he would be confined to a wheelchair. Finally, all he could do was move a little bit his hand, finally just blinking. And he just kept going and kept going. And he's written all sorts of books, and he has a prestigious position. Who says it's impossible? Who says it's impossible? And God makes all things possible. I think, in fact, for people who do have that kind of will, that God administers to them a general grace. Whether you believe or not, God has a general grace for nations in the world who may not believe, people in need in the world who may not believe. God has a general grace for everyone. And I think the source of those things is God. We've all seen Stephen Hawking or pictures of him. Just finally one little thing he can move. And we say, well, it's all over. But it's not all over, is it? It's not all over. And of course, I'm sure we're all familiar with Arnold Schwarzenegger. You know, the weight trainer. I once talked to somebody who knew him, and he said, He was amazing. He could tolerate all kinds of pain. You could sit a car on his head and it wouldn't affect him at all. And someone said that he had an iron will. Again, regardless of his belief, I thank God has a general grace which enables that sort of thing in our world. And if they can do that, by God's strength, we should be able to do anything, right? We should be able to do anything. And circumstances do not have to be ideal. Arnold one day was doing all that stuff you're supposed to do when you're showing off your muscles, at contests and so forth. I could do that, but you'd start laughing, okay? Because, but at any rate, the platform collapsed, and he injured a leg severely. And his response to that was, well, I'm just going to work on this leg, and I'm going to just, get through this, and so forth. I think that's the general grace that enables us to do that God gives pretty much to everyone. And now us as followers of God, if that can happen out there, isn't it true that it can happen for us? That it can happen for us? Because God gives the victory if we walk closely with God, if we follow and study God's Word, if we worship together as the people of God, walking closely with God in prayer, surely, if the general world can do these things, we will be given the victory by God, whatever the circumstances might happen to be, in one way or another. In one way or another. Walking with God, we will be victorious over many things. I have a personal instance that I could mention as well. One dark night, while I was traveling around up in the Upper Peninsula, I was going around some curves, and it was just like you see in the television commercials about somebody who might happen to be drunk, who comes into your headlights and so forth, right into your windshield with their lights. Somebody had not made the curve. I don't know whether they had been drinking or what, but they were traveling at a high rate of speed. They were coming directly head on into me. Well, I sidled over into the ditch, but I didn't know whether or not I'd be able to miss them or not. The last thing I remember before I hit a little embankment is that I saw the passenger, as the car was skidding toward me, really close to my driver's door, and I braced for an impact which never came. It never came, and I don't understand why it didn't, because they were so close. And the officer who came later said, I don't really understand how that car missed you. He looked at the skid marks, and they were extremely close, and he said, I don't understand how they missed you. Of course, the driver sped off, when I got out of the car. But God and I had a few conversations about that. We had a few conversations. I wasn't, of course, exactly myself right after that, but I thought of the way in which perhaps God was watching over me. You see, and even if I had been in a wreck in that, I would be relying on God to help me to recover. God is our rock. When we see in the scripture passage for today, Jacob wrestling with God, we see someone who is determined to be blessed by God. In the same way, we need to be determined to be blessed by God and have the victory through God. He struggled with God and would not let God go until God blessed him. It's a wonderful story. And finally, we need to say then that with this determination to be blessed by God, we see that we are blessed through Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ gives us the key to living in a way in which salvation becomes part of our lives. Our lives are beautiful, played out in the key of salvation. through Jesus Christ. In our modern world, things turn out fine if we use that key of salvation. Then life plays out well. And it's the only way to play the music of life well, through the key that Jesus gives to us. Amen. Before we go to silent prayer, we need to mention a few things that have had a great impact on us. Harvey, the hurricane left incredible devastation, and we feel for the victims in relation to that, because it's enormous. It's really enormous. And we pray that God would give them grace. The opiate epidemic is getting worse. 60,000 people dying of overdoses. It's the leading cause of death now. 60,000 people divided by 12, roughly a small town would be dying of overdoses every month. Amazing. Something we need to remember in prayer. This is the 1-year anniversary, pretty close to the flood that we ourselves recovered from in this church. You remember the Great Flood? I was going to collect a lot of gopher wood and build an ark, actually, because it was pretty thick in here as far as the water was concerned. And we can thank God that we were able to get through that. Internationally, with Russia, our relationship with them seems to be getting worse. We're expelling diplomats, and that's something to keep in mind. North Korea seems to have set off something that was more powerful than anything they've set off before, and they say that they can put it on a ballistic missile, intercontinental ballistic missile. Whether they can or not, it was a huge explosion. They say it was a hydrogen bomb. Well, we don't know. But at any rate, the tensions that are building internationally are something that we can hold before God as well. Lord, we thank you that you are here with us, that you watch over us. We especially pray for those who have experienced the storm in Texas. A lot of them are very much at loose ends. Some of them only have the shirt on their backs left. We pray, Lord, that in your general grace, you might give to them the assistance that they need and support those who are helping them. It's a matter of great concern for us. We know that you are a God of compassion, Lord. Help them. And the human spirit is often filled with disquiet. The human spirit is often filled with the disquiet of addiction. And opioid addiction is devastating this time. We pray, Lord, that you would help us and guide us through that. We thank you, Lord, that you have helped us and guided us during the time that the church flooded. We felt your guiding hand. We thank you very much for that. We pray, Lord, that your guiding hand would also be part of international relations. We are aware of the tensions with Russia and North Korea. We pray, Lord, that you would guide them just as you guided your disciples. And we pray as you taught them to pray, saying, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
You have been listening to St. Paul United Church of Christ, 2030 Plank Road, Keokuk. Join our worship service at 10 a.m. with fellowship hour immediately following. Until next week, may God bless.